Hi, my name is Brigid Tuck. I'm the Applied Research Specialist for University of Minnesota Extension. I'm in the Department of Community Development, and I work statewide with communities to help them understand what's happening with their economies, and I also run our Economic Impact Analysis program. It's in that role that I have the pleasure of working with Red Wing to understand the economic contribution riverboats in Red Wing. So if you're familiar with Red Wing at all, they have Levy Park, and they've made some investment to have a nice area where the riverboats, when they come up from New Orleans and areas south to stop in Red Wing, people are able to debark from the boat and spend some time. There are tour companies that have arranged tours for people. So some people get on to the buses that are provided by the riverboats and they go to places in the community. For example, in Red Wing, a lot of people go to the National Eagle Center, but they are also able to just take some time to explore downtown Red Wing and get out in the community. So Red Wing really wanted to understand, we've invested in this. Is this having a return for us? What does that return look like? Are there other areas that we might consider investing in that would have contribute to that economic impact? Kind of what are the people thinking when they're coming on the riverboats? So we were able to help them sort of study this a little bit. We did this work in 2024, 2025. So just to give you kind of a sense of what's going on here, when we look at economic impact, we really have to look at three things. We need to look at the direct effect, and then we look at the indirect and the induced effects. The direct effect is the initial change in the economy. So there's a couple of different ways that riverboats are affecting the Red Wing area economy. Part of it is through operations, and then part of it is by spending by visitors. So when it comes to operations, riverboats have to spend money. They have to buy fuel. They have to do things when they're in port. And so they are making some expenditures that way and spending some money in Red Wing. There's also the tour operations piece of this. So tour operators are being paid to do their work and to work with the passengers. So there's some economic impact from that. Then on the other side, the direct effect column here is spending by visitors. So when visitors are in the community, they're going around and doing things or spending money. There's a couple of different pieces. What was kind of interesting about this study is there's a couple of different types of visitors. There's the passengers themselves, right? We know kind of who they are, but then there's the riverboat employees. So the riverboat employees, they're on the boat, obviously 24/7 with the passengers. And so when they stop in port, they often get off and go and purchase some of the supplies that they need, just their kind of day to day, if they need toothpaste kind of thing. And then there's also the boat watchers. So as mentioned, Red Wing does have Levy Park, so people come just to watch the riverboats land. So when we were trying to understand this economic contribution, we had to try to understand all three of these different kinds of passengers, or all three different kinds of visitors. Once we have the direct effect or that initial change, then we need to know the indirect and induced effects. So those are the ripple effects, if you will. These are businesses that may never see a riverboat passenger come in their front door, but they are benefiting because the riverboats are here and the passengers are here. So this might look like, if you're going to a restaurant and the riverboat passengers are dining out, they're buying additional food, they're spending more time in the restaurant, which maybe increases their use of electricity. And so maybe the electric company has to provide more power for that particular time period, and that creates economic activity for them, even if no one's going out and knocking on the door of the electric company. So you can see that there are some places where we see indirect and induced effects, and we can measure those through our models. We call them input-output models. So going back to the direct effect here a little bit, we were looking at all these different pieces. When we want to know visitor spending, we kind of need to know two things. We need to know the number of visitors, and we need to know spending per visitor. Now, this was more complicated because we did have these different categories of visitors. So if you want to know how we calculated the number of visitors, I encourage you to check out the report. But then also we had to do spending per visitor, and we did that through a survey. So the tour operators were kind enough to hand out surveys to people as they went, and so we got some survey results here. And we did that survey in summer and fall of 2024. It was a little bit of an odd year in 2024 because of some river flooding, but we were able to get the survey done. So when we look at average spending per person for the riverboat passengers and the three different categories, we found that they spent on average $44 per person per day. Now that is a little bit lower, partially because there isn't really a lot of spending on lodging, right? So riverboat passengers, by and large, sleep on the riverboat, right? So there's some expenditure for lodging here that comes down to kind of some of the people coming through the region to visit and see the riverboats, but not a ton of spending there. The big thing really for Red Wing is that they're spending on average almost $30 per person on retail. So they're taking advantage of kind of that downtown area. If we put all this together, total spending came up to be about $232,000 in a quote unquote normal year. As I mentioned, there were a couple weeks where the boats couldn't land because of the flooding. So we wanted to understand a full year. And so we extrapolated out for those missing weeks. So if we look at the total economic contribution of the River boats in a normal year, you can see the direct impact here, about just over $600,000 of direct spending. That includes the passengers plus the expenditures for the riverboat operations and the tours and all those kind of things. Supports about 11 jobs and generates about $200,000 in labor income for people in the Red Wing area. In total, then, the economic contribution is just shy of $800,000. Supporting employment for about 57 people and creating about $260,000 in labor income. So that's the big picture of the Red Wing Riverboats. One of the other things that I think was really notable when we did the survey is that 2 out of 3 people filling out the survey said they were highly satisfied with their visit. Now, a lot of times when you see satisfaction scores, we combine satisfied and very satisfied, and those can get up pretty high. But to have 2 out of 3 check very satisfied or highly satisfied was pretty unique, and it speaks a lot to the character of Red Wing. And when we kind of probed into kind of why do people really like visiting Red Wing, the natural and scenic beauty of the area came to the top, the historic downtown, the museum options, and then just the friendliness of the community. So again, this says a lot about Red Wing and being a friendly place to visit, but it also gives them some really good tips of thinking about where do we want to invest. If we're making investments and we want to kind of keep our tourism up, this does point to some of the places that they might want to do that investment. The riverboats are also drawing people to Red Wing. From a tourism perspective, I think a lot of you would be excited if you had these kind of numbers. 99% of the people who filled out the survey said they were in Red Wing because of the riverboat. So the riverboat is driving traffic right into Red Wing, and 96% of those were first-time visitors. As you know, it's always important to get people in your community. If you get them in and they 2 out of every 3 say they're highly satisfied, you're likely to see them in your community again. So that's a good, strong statistic. So with that, I will end my presentation here. You can find this report on our website. I'm always happy to answer questions as well. So if you want to, you can reach out to me via my email. Thank you.